said. He said, this is the most important election in 50 years. And if we don't win, he's going to not going to win in 2020. And he encouraged everybody to stand up and do more. And I have faith that our party is the party of values, and everybody's going to stand up and do more and come to support whatever candidate gets on the ballot to beat David Young. Thank you.
Okay, very good. This question starts with Pete. What is the comprehensive?
First thing we have to do is, and I actually go even a step further, first thing we have to do is, we have to codify DACA as the law of the land, but I think even more important than that, we have to start changing the rhetoric that we use. I don't use, and I've talked to this, but I don't use the term undocumented or these kids are Americans. These people are Americans. And that may not play well everywhere, but I don't really care. We need to start looking at this issue for what it is. We need to live up to our, and follow our better angels on it. So what I would do is I would have a path to citizenship for anyone who's been here. And to me, we would have to draw it up, we would draw it up as the quickest path possible that we can do it. These people that we are talking about, these human beings that we are talking about, are the best of us. They have built communities, they have built businesses, they have gone to school, they have served in our military. I will say this first and foremost, I would push for a law that says that anybody who serves in our military, regardless of their status right now, that is your path to citizenship. You've earned your path to citizenship. I come from a family who had two cousins when my family got here from Italy, who became American citizens because of that very purpose. We've done that before in this country. I believe that is a specific that we should do and we should stand for very strongly. But I think the path to citizenship should be very, very quick and very short. These folks we are talking about, they're not just a number. These are human beings. They are Americans, and we should codify it into law.
You know, in my work at Amos, one of the very first initiatives we did was from Our Lady of the Americas. They came to us and said, we have a community of people here that are living in the shadows. This is 20 years ago. And we went up to the State House and we first fought for driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. And then we fought for our dreamers. And we had a rally down there where I was asked to speak in front of about 700 Hispanic and white people throughout the community and fight for the rights that we all got as, from our ancestors that were immigrants before us. My work in the immigrant world, in the immigrant community, especially Latino communities, has been long going, to the point where Joe Henry has called and said, you know what, I want to support your campaign. He's the president of the local LULAC here in town. Joe Fernandez, who was the former president of LULAC here in town, is supporting our campaign. He knows what I've done for people that don't have a voice in this community. They both have seen firsthand how I've gone up to the State House and fighted just there a week or so ago, maybe just last Friday. When was that day? We're out fighting against that hateful legislation that's going on to make communities, forcing them into enforcement initiatives against people of color. We need to have an immigration reform, no doubt about it. It needs to be comprehensive. What we also need to do is go out and change the conversation in our communities, especially in Southwest Iowa, where there's a lot of fear, not always racism. We can't accuse people of being racist. Sometimes it's fear. It's fear of the unknown. If you go and talk to people in Perry, Iowa, and then go talk to somebody in Red Oak, Iowa, and tell them what the difference is and what your future might be if you would embrace the immigrant brothers and sisters in front of us, how that is very important for our economy and our future. Because unless something changes, and Teresa and Cindy and my wife and others start having 10 or 12 kids, we won't have enough kids in this community to get to the economy that we need to have. And if we want to grow an economy that we really think is important, we better embrace other people from other cultures and other countries and bring them in here and make them part of our community. Thank you.
Well, Eddie, I'm good with my 2 teenage boys. I'll stick with them. Thank you. Recently, I attended the Latino Awards banquet, and one of the most impactful things of that evening was watching two young dreamers come up and receive an award for their community involvement. These are young people who grew up in the Des Moines area, who went to school here. Their friends and family are here. They're now in jobs, they're taxpayers, and they're contributing back to our economy. And now they're doing so much to help our communities that they're receiving awards for their work. To know that these young people might be sent home, back to wherever, their family's from, originally at any given point in time is incredibly disturbing. These kids deserve better than that. So I want to make sure that our DACA recipients have a quick pathway to citizenship, codify it, like Pete has said. I also want to make sure that all undocumented immigrants without a criminal or violent background have a pathway to citizenship. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we do have good immigration reform. We need to make sure that our country stays safe, and we also need to make sure that the immigrants that come here have opportunity and that they're safe in their workplaces and in their communities. Right here in Iowa, on a regular basis, we know that there are employers who are abusing immigrants who are flying under the radar. Women who are being sexually abused, people who are being forced into work conditions that are unhealthy and unsafe for them, and they need protection, and that's why it's important that we have these laws in place. Right here in our own backyard, we earlier mentioned Perry, but up in Storm Lake, Steve King's territory, we know how much those immigrants have done to turn that community around, not just from an economic perspective, but truly driving that community and making it a place where families want to be again. And we need to look to those communities to be the places that we should have across Iowa everywhere we go. Thank you.
Okay, I'm never sure when she's gonna start or not. Okay, well, thank you. Well, I tell you what, we made a promise to 800,000 dreamers, young folks who are part of our community, who are leaders, that if they came out of the shadows, we would take care of them and protect them. And we need to follow through on that promise, first and foremost. And when we're done with that, or in conjunction with that, we need to pass some comprehensive immigration reform. We absolutely have to provide some protected status and a path to earn your citizenship. I agree with Pete. I have a son that's in the military, and many of his partners on the field, folks he works with, are immigrants. And he tells me all the time, Mom, they need to have their citizenship when they are discharged, and that's something I absolutely stand up for if I'm in Washington, D.C. So what does comprehensive immigration reform look like? Well, it includes taking care of workers, both immigrant workers and the workers that we have today, making sure their safety is protected. There are a lot of wage theft that's going on out there. It includes adding a system to identify and make sure that workers are citizens or are on that pathway, and stop businesses from taking advantage of undocumented workers. Finally, I would tell you, we don't need a wall. We don't need a wall. If there's any wall I want to build, it's around Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, but that'll be another question. 40% of the immigrants that come to our country, undocumented, overstay their visas. And they're not coming across the river, some border all the time. These are friends, families in our communities. Finally, as I go back to the small town where I came from, immigrants have become part of that community. And while it's taken time for some of my German and Norwegian heritage-based folks to get to know them, they now embrace them, and they're critical in their faith communities, employment, and own many of the small businesses in that small town. Thank you.
Okay, this is a related question, but different enough that I think it bears its own spotlight, having to do with refugees. And this person is talking about refugees being brought in by large corporations. And what do you think about that and the exploitation of them, or the use for them to drive down wages, or in that matter as well, the refugees that we have denied entrance
So, wow, that's kind of a pretty wide open question. Let me start with this. I do a project in Africa where I travel to a couple times a year and get a chance to work with folks that are refugees. Several of them make their way out of Tanzania into neighboring countries. Some are coming from neighboring countries into Tanzania. Throughout this world right now, we have a refugee crisis, which is somewhat interrelated to our economic and trade policy, somewhat related to climate change and what's going on with our environment. People are on the move. People are moving into Europe, and people are trying to make their way into the United States. I think the question, though, has to do with what do we do with folks that are coming in that maybe the corporations are bringing unscrupulously to drive down wages or to get an unfair advantage, and we need to make sure that we have policies in place that don't allow that to happen. It's the same thing that's going on with the undocumented community as well. So I think if there's anything going on where we're allowing people to be mistreated, underpaid, to have working conditions that are not the par with what should be ideal for any American citizen, then we need to make sure we have policies and having enforcement opportunities and make sure we're funding enforcement opportunities to make sure that doesn't happen. At the same time, we want to be a welcoming community. Just a couple weeks ago, I went to the federal building and saw 50 people receive their citizenship from 30 different countries around the world, white countries, black countries, brown countries, yellow countries. This is a country of immigrants, and we should be welcoming them, and those are all at some time either refugees, whether they're political refugees, asylum refugees, or economic refugees, or coming because of natural disasters. This is a country that should accept them and find pathways for them to become productive members in our community, just like my ancestors did once upon a time. Thank you.
Well, Iowa has always been a welcoming state when it comes to refugees. I think Governor Robert Ray was a really good example of that when the Thai and Laotians came to Iowa, and they have contributed so much to this community, from economic opportunity to cultural opportunities that they've brought to the Des Moines area and to Iowa as a whole. Just like Eddie, I try and support people who are in impoverished and war-torn communities throughout the world. Sponsor a child in the Philippines through an organization called Unbound that helps to raise up the lives of children and elderly people in war-torn and poverty countries. As well as I support the efforts of Catholic Charities, one of the best organizations to help refugees find a place when they have to go to a new state, a new country, so that they feel welcome in that community. I can't imagine what it would be like to live in a society that's ravaged by war and poverty on a consistent basis. I think as a country that we need to go back to our roots and understand that we were built from the hard work and labor of immigrants and refugees, and we need to continue to welcome them with open arms. We have got to give opportunity to people who don't have that in other parts of this world. It's our responsibility as good human beings. So we need to become a welcoming state and, once again, a welcoming country. I agree that we need to make sure that we've got policy and enforcement. We want to keep our country safe, we want to keep our state safe, but we also have to protect our refugees as well and make sure that they are taken care of from a health and welfare perspective and not taken advantage of in the workplace and in our communities. So just like Eddie said, I'll be working to make sure that we've got pathways to help our refugees become full-fledged citizens here through a pathway. Thank you.
One of the great things about growing up in my small town was a real strong faith communities, whether you were Lutheran or whether you're Catholic. And it was a town of 400, and there was a real effort to welcome refugees at that point in time. We had a number of families that came from the Philippines, and my parents and other community members were committed to helping them find homes and work, and food and clothing and shelter. That's the culture I grew up in. Unfortunately, our current leadership, President Trump, doesn't believe the same and doesn't share the same values we do about welcoming people and caring for others. And frankly, that's what I love about being a Democrat, because we're about making people's lives better, whether it's folks that are living here or whether it's our friends and neighbors all around this world. We need different leadership to make that happen. I think much of this is rolled in with a comprehensive immigration plan, but it's also rolled in with the policies, with how we help people provide, gain shelter, feed their families, get training, assimilate into their communities, learn some English and skills so they can get jobs. That's not gonna happen until we get the folks like David Young out of office and folks like the people up here at the table who care about people and wanna make a difference in people's lives.
I think it's clear we're all in agreement that there has to be a welcoming attitude as Americans. But we're not gonna solve this problem unless we actually have the guts to talk about what caused the problem. For nearly a generation now in our own country, we have allowed corporate greed to not only rule our economy, we've allowed it in many ways to rule our power. We have the highest income disparity between the rich and the poor than we've had since the Great Depression. We've had these terrible trade agreements that we've pushed. Both parties neither party is absolved of blame on this. That we've pushed now for a generation that have hurt working people, that have hurt manufacturing. We have allowed them to take laws that make it tougher to organize if you want to be in a labor union. We've allowed Wall Street to steal everything in sight and not even have to worry about going to jail. And we wonder why now that the next step they're going to take is we want that inequality. We want a little more. You've given us this much. We want a little more. So we're going to take folks that aren't even citizens and we're going to bring them in and we're going to pay them even less than we paid you. We, royal we, as a society, we've allowed it to happen. So now we have to step up and say, no more. Enough is enough. You're not going to be able to get away with this anymore. We are going to put laws in place that don't allow corporations to run amok, that doesn't allow Wall Street to run amok whenever they want to. And certainly, this is a good place to start, but we can also start with some of these other things, like making it easier to organize for American workers to join a union and to bring this and to make those at the top of the scale pay their fair share in taxes so that we can get to where we need to be on this economic level. So this whole thing is 25, 30 years in the making, and we have to address why it happened, and then we'll be able to get to the solutions that need to happen.
Very good, thank you. Okay. You get to start, you get to start with the gun question. With the March for Our Lives events now in the national media, are you seeing any young people getting involved in your campaign? How are you reaching out to those people and their parents?
So lots of young people. I come from that world as a teacher and a coach for a number of years, and have been seeing folks at the Capitol on Saturday afternoon in the sleet and snow, and got a chance to talk to kids from Lincoln High School and Hoover High School and East School and East High School and Ames High School, a great enthusiastic group of people that were there. And this is an issue that's been with us for over 20 years now, actually longer than that. You know, back when I was a teacher, we would get a bulletin every once in a while that said, hey, today's a fire drill. Today's a tornado drill, right? Now we're having active shooter drills. And then instead of doing continuing ed classes so that we can teach our kids and help them analyze and synthesize and become better critical thinkers, we're having classes about what we're going to do when we do have a shooting situation. And that has to stop. We can support and respect our Second Amendment, at the same time protecting our kids and our loved ones. Justice Antonin Scalia, go look him up, a good conservative Supreme Court justice, has spoken very eloquently about the restrictions that the Second Amendment should have. It's not unlimited, but there are some things we should be doing. Obviously, funding through the CDC to look at this as a health-related matter, to find out what we have going on, collecting that data. Background checks for everybody, closing the Charleston loophole so that somebody does get a check isn't allowed to get a gun while that check is taking place, even though the 3-day waiting period passes by. Taking a look at all the weapons that we have in this country and find out what weapons people should have and what they shouldn't have. All common sense. And actually, 90% of the people, in most of those instances, agree with that. What we need to start doing, and Pete hit on this a little bit, is we need to talk about money. Because David Young has been bought already to not look at this issue wholeheartedly and holistically. And that has to stop. It has to stop on not only this issue, but many other issues that are out there. So we do have lots of young people that are supporting us. We have lots of young people that are asking us questions about where we stand. And a lot of folks that will be coming out, oh, I'm sorry, I said stop. Lots of folks that are going to come out and see some of the events we have going on relative to this. Thank you very much.
Well, what a timely question. How are we going to get young people involved? I actually spoke with a woman today, as a matter of fact, she's making this her life's goal. She said that only 14% of college students vote, 14%. And so I had her look up how many college students we had here in Iowa District 3. It's 41,400. We're missing out on a heck of a lot of votes. And most college kids are going to vote Democrat because we've got the values that they believe in. So we're working incredibly hard to make sure that we get their vote. I'm fortunate that Josh Hughes, who's the Drake Democrats president, has supported and endorsed our campaign. He's working hard to help us flip the seat. We are very welcoming in our campaign to helping make sure that young kids are heavily involved. We just hired a field organizer who goes to Drake University, and she'll be graduating in May. So we are making it a priority to get out to as many colleges and schools as we can to talk to people about how important it is to participate in democracy. Briefly to touch on the gun issue here, right now we're seeing one school shooting per week. We're seeing 96 people every single day die in this country because of gun violence. This is absolutely unacceptable. If this was a disease, we'd be working incredibly hard to eradicate it. But because David Young is the third largest recipient of NRA funding in Congress, he's not going to do a darn thing about it. We've absolutely got to close the loopholes on our background checks, make sure that we have background checks at gun shows, online sales, person-to-person transfers, so that we keep the guns out of the hands of people who have criminal, violent, and mental health issues and backgrounds, and make sure that we reinstate the assault weapons ban, because there's no place for those weapons on our streets. You know, I send my kids to school every single day and hope that they come home safe at night. And we're in a society now where parents have to worry about that. And I can tell you one thing, that's a burden that's too hard to bear. And we've got to make sure that every single parent knows their kid's going to make it home safe that day. Thank you.
Well, I stand with the kids. You know, I grew up on a farm, and guns were an important part of our culture. Whether it was target practice, whether it was sport, like clay pigeons. And a really important part of it was, of course, hunting and making sure that there was venison sausage for the holidays. I'm come from a long line of family of responsible gun owners. And I'll tell you what, Iowa has a culture of responsible gun owners too. This conversation about how we reduce gun violence is something that we, as responsible gun owners, need to participate in and take back that conversation from a powerful, powerful lobby. So what does that mean? Well, it means we got to talk about sensible steps to keep guns out of the hands of folks who could do terrible things with them, whether that is universal background checks, closing loopholes. Goodness sakes, how come everybody can't agree? If you were on a list that says you can't get on an airplane and fly with all of us, that you can't be on a list that says you cannot buy a gun. Common sense should rule on this. Now I'll tell you, of the 96 or 90 plus folks a day that are dying at the hands of gunshot wounds, many of them are from suicide. And I don't want that to get lost in this conversation, because this is a public health crisis on a lot of levels. I know in our family, we've certainly had suicide impact us. So when I have friends who are maybe on the other side of the aisle that want to invest in mental health care, I say let's do that. Vote for leaders that will do that. Don't just say you want some mental health care. Vote for those kind of people. I know I intend to. So when I'm in Washington, D.C., I absolutely will be working on coming together, both sides of the aisle, to talk about sensible gun regulations and policies to reduce gun violence.
And great honor this weekend to be in Creston for Walk for Our Lives. And this is the answer to the question about the young people. It was put together completely by high school students and a few younger adults, and it was empowering to be there. I feel really lucky to be 53 years old with this next group of people coming behind us, that's coming behind us. Because I really believe, and I worked with a lot of them for 16 months on that Bernie Sanders campaign, and then the last couple of months with the Hillary Clinton campaign. I really believe they're our next great generation. They're motivated by the right things, that they want to do well by people, and I'm just so proud of the ones that are on our campaign, but also of the ones that I've worked with. I think we're in good shape when it comes to that. 90% of the people in this country believe that if our brothers and sisters that are suffering from mental health problems should have a little tougher time purchasing a gun. Over 80% of our fellow citizens believe that we should close the gun show loophole. Over 80% believe that we need stronger, longer waiting periods for folks that want to legally buy a gun. And over 70% of Americans now believe that we should ban assault weapons in the most recent poll. And yet there's not even a serious debate about it in the United States Congress. It's because the NRA owns too many congressmen like David Young. And I'll use that word, they own them. So this is a gun issue, and we have to address it. It's the campaign finance issue also, folks. We've got to change the way that we fund our campaigns here, because as long as those people that have the levers on the money are able to speak more than 80 and 90% of our fellow citizens that we're all part of, as long as they have their hands on that lever, it is going to be that much tougher, and we won't get a serious discussion because they can keep buying people like David Young. And that's part of this discussion also.
Okay, very good. I'll do a little housekeeping now. We don't have the kind of food the Asian Latino group has. But we do have cookies. And we have bottled water there if you can get this. Restrooms are where we came in. There's a men's room and a women's room right where we came in. So feel free to wander, get a cookie, drink, go to the restroom. We're informal here. Next question. This is an oldie but goodie. Since Congress has been so dysfunctional, what are you going to do specifically to work with all the persons in Congress to move forward? You got this.
Well, you know, there's no silver bullet for this, but I think it goes back to two things. First and foremost, anytime that you have an opportunity to meet somebody in a discussion that directly impacts their lives or has interest to them, you have a better chance at getting started off on the right foot. As a journalism undergrad, I'm one of those people that's notorious for asking 5 or 6 questions to get to the root cause of something. So I consistently want to find out what it is that makes somebody tick. I think that's one of the most important things that we need to be doing when I get to Congress, is make sure that I find allies, people who are interested in the same issues for their state and their district that I'm interested in for this district here in Iowa, and make sure that I start forming those relationships with them. Making sure that I understand the key issues that are important to them, whether it's their own family's issues, friends, family, their district issues. There's always something that we can find some agreement on. So that's the first place that I'm going to start with, making sure that I have those personal relationships with my fellow Congresspeople. That's what's most important. You know, I worked at the state of Iowa. I spent most of my time there under Governors Vilsack and Culver, but I did spend part of my time under Governor Branstad's administration. Left there about 4 years ago. So I certainly know what it's like to have to work on issues where there's differences of opinion. And I was able to be successful at the Department of Natural Resources in making sure that we protected merit-covered employees, for example, when I fought back against that when the administration wanted to turn those employees into at-will. Really working with the administration, explaining how important it was to ensure that those employees were kept as merit covered so that they could do their work best and represent the needs that the people here in Iowa have. And so I think the most important thing is to ensure that we meet on common ground, and then we find that place where we can start the discussion, and then also know that I've done it in the past and I'm ready to go out to Washington and do it in the future. Thank you.
Banana bread. That might be the way we do it. Yep, I think I'm going to show up with 435 loaves of banana bread. Because that's how we reach out through food and sharing and tell people that we care about them. And that's how, if we're gonna work together, we have to approach everyone that in Congress, that I care about you first, and then let's talk about the policies. I tell you, I spent 14 years, and what I studied was community planning. And I spent all those years at night meetings, neighborhood meetings, zoning board meetings, listening to the folks on the ground, living along the street where a road might be changed, or next to a park that needed to be changed. And what I learned from that, and part of what drives me to run, is that if we don't have all the stakeholders at the table wanting to talk about what we have in common, not how we're different, policies don't work. And we can do that. And we do that by electing citizen leaders, new leaders who want to sit at that table, who want to listen to the other side and begin to work together. I've got a great idea. When I go to Congress, how about if we make a list of the things we agree upon, like an infrastructure package, and get that done first, instead of working on the things we don't agree upon, over banana bread.
My first suggestion would be, let's elect 300 Democrats. And let's go with 60 senators, and then we won't even have to worry about this question, because then we'll be able to actually build a progressive agenda that we know we should be building. Obviously, I say that because I want it to happen, but I say it a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Our politics has gotten really sour in this country. And I think one thing that you can tell by the demeanor and the way I would answer this question is look at how, I always say, and I feel it when I'm up here with these other folks here, is that I have opponents in this race, but I don't have enemies in this race. And there is a difference. I think we have to start with our politics. I think if we do our politics hard, we do our politics strong, we stand for things, but if we don't make our politics as nasty, then I think our government's not as nasty, because we're electing people who got there in that way. I constantly think back to when Robert Kennedy announced that he was running for president. He said he wasn't running to oppose anybody, he was running to propose new policies. I see that up here at this table. I also believe that's what we should expect from our politics. So as a voter, expect that from your politics, demand it from us, that what we're talking about is what we're gonna do. And we're not gonna be against anyone because of who they are, but because of what we wanna do. I think if we make our politics look and strive for our better angels, our government will follow, because that's the type of people we will elect. And I feel that every time I'm with these folks, and I'm seeing it all around our state and our country this year with the type of people that are running.
That kind of goes with the earlier question about our young kids. Because when you talk to millennials and you talk to Generation Z, which is our youngest kids, I think, that's kind of a scary proposition. What comes after Z? I think the end of the world's coming. They ask us, when are we going to start acting like the grown-ups we claim to be? When are we going to start getting along and figuring things out? And that's not just a Republican issue, that's a Democrat issue too. We are all guilty over the past 30 years. I'll blame the Republicans for starting it, but we haven't been very big in handling it ourselves. So what do we need to do? Obviously, we need to go to Washington, D.C., and we need to find not only common ground, but those that disagree with us and disagree with us strongly, find out why they do. Why is it so hard for us to meet the promise of Social Security and Medicare for our seniors that have blazed the path in front of us? Let's find out what that hurdle is that's in our way and figure out how we can overcome that hurdle. Why is it so hard for us to make sure that we have health care for every American in this country, the greatest country in the world? And find out what those hurdles are that are in front of us and find ways to get over them. Why is it so hard for us to make sure that we have a global economy for the many and not for the few? And find out what those hurdles are and make sure we overcome them. And I've done that. I've done that starting with Amos. I was put on a governor's task force signed by Governor Bill Sack. And we had a group of people on there that was so divided when we got started, I thought there was no way we'd come up to any consensus. And I sat down with each and every one of them individually and asked them, where's your hurdle at? How do we overcome that? And by the time we were done, we all agreed. We agreed that it made sense because it was just practical, that everybody should have a driver's license in this state. And we recommended that to our legislature. And that was a group of Republicans, that was a group of folks that were adamantly opposed to that, and brought them together. And that is what we need to do. We need to go have those frank conversations. We need to put our team B, our team R aside, and we need to start doing what's best for Team America. Thank you very much.
Excuse me.
Okay. How you guys doing with water? All right. This one I believe you started. Teresa, how would you fix our healthcare system?
Well, it's obvious our healthcare system is broken, and those of us that need healthcare, which I think is everybody, know that this isn't a Republican or a Democratic problem. It's a problem we face every day. It's something that hits our pocketbooks hard. It is about access. It's about healthcare, mental health care. It's about rural access and rural care. It's about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So how would I fix it? Well, right now, we need to take back Congress so we can have a seat at the table and begin to talk about what comes next in healthcare and for healthcare for Iowans and Americans. If I'm in Washington, D.C., the first thing I want to do, what we need to continue to do between now and then, is stop any more erosion, repeal and replace of the current ACA, which has provided health insurance for so many millions of Americans. And the new tax plan just took 13 million Americans off of that kind of health insurance. We've learned over 10 years that the ACA maybe isn't perfect, and that we've learned things that we can do better. And that's the first step we need to take, is sit down across the aisle in a cooperative manner and shore up the ACA, make sure that includes more people, if not everyone, because the goal is universal health care as far as I'm concerned, health care for every American. And then after that, if we can get the leadership together in Washington, D.C., then we need to talk about other options to ensure absolutely everyone has health care, whether that's a public option on top of the ACA, whether that's Medicaid for more, or some type of universal care program. We can do it, Americans want it done, and we just need to vote for leaders that will make that happen.
I quite simply think it's time for this country, richest country in the history of the world, a country that's done so much for so many people, to codify into a law what I think is a very simple but powerful truth. Healthcare is not a privilege of the few. Healthcare is a birthright. And we need to join those countries that we have historically called our allies, our friends, who have all done it. The simple fact of the matter is I believe with all of my being that is a Medicare for all system. I want to make sure the guy taping gets that right. Medicare for all system. We need to codify that into law. Medicare is the most successful government program in the history of the world. Second generation now of seniors is living in dignity that wasn't even available before this party and this country found the will to do that. This isn't something radical. This isn't reinventing anything. This is taking the most successful social program in the history of the world and saying it's provided dignity for this group of people. We're going to expand it so that we guarantee all of our citizens have that same dignity, and they never have to worry about when they walk out of their door any day to go to work or any other thing, that they could lose everything that they've gained, everything they've worked for, because they happen to get sick or something happens to them that they didn't expect happening. We can do it because we've done it before. I will stand for that. I talk about it everywhere in this district. We can make it happen because we've done it before. We will do it again. It is the next answer. It is the next step from the ACA. We need a Medicare for all system in this country.
My goal is simply to make sure that we have health care for everybody without any barriers, regardless of where you live or your financial condition. And that could be a health care for all scenario, or that could be a combination of a public-private option. It doesn't make a difference for me. We just need to get there. I make my living today in the insurance world. I took a small operation here in Des Moines, and I've grown into a multi-million-dollar endeavor. It's property and casualty driven, so don't hate me because I'm not a health insurance guy. But I know the industry very well. I know risk management very well. I know data analytics analytics very well, I know risk, I know about what we need to be doing from an underwriting and actuarial perspective. Every day I get an email from our company friends that says, do not write business in Santa Barbara, California, because it's on fire. Do not write business in Miami, Florida, because it's about to be blown over. Do not write business in Red River of North Dakota, because it's about to be flooded. And that's what we're trying to do with some of our people in our country today. We're trying to insure folks that are on fire. And insurance doesn't work that way. And that's why we're having so many disruptions right now. So there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a public and private initiative where we make sure that people, whether they have a pre-existing condition or not, have a way to make sure they have the same coverage that guys like David Young have, guys like Chuck Grassley have. And there's no reason, again, as Pete mentioned, the greatest country in the world, why we don't make that happen. I will tell you, the ACA is stumbled some, but it is the pathway forward. Barack Obama and those folks put us on the pathway we need to go. I think we need to be careful though, because some people think this needs to happen tomorrow. And it's not going to happen in a day. This is going to be a 25-year initiative. We need to make sure we're in this for the long haul. We need to keep fighting every day. And our goal right now is to make sure everybody has care today, and I don't care if it comes from a public or a private endeavor. We make sure everybody has care. That's our number one goal right now. Thank you very much.
Well, when I go to Congress, I'm going to make sure that every single person has access to affordable, effective care. Right now, Congressman Young and the Republicans, they want to take us back. They want to take us back to a time where pre-existing conditions weren't covered, where our seniors couldn't afford the services and the medicines they need, and where some basic care wasn't available. And I remember that. My husband and I started our small business about 15 years ago, and we couldn't get maternity coverage as part of an individual plan back then unless you paid for a rider to the tune of $1,000 a month and then held that in place for at least a year before becoming pregnant. Well, we couldn't afford that. So when we had our second son, who's now 13, we literally had to sell our personal items on eBay just to cover the cost of those medical bills because I had a baby in a hospital. And we can't go back to those times where families are being forced to make decisions between keeping the lights on and putting food on the table and making sure that their family has the health care that they need. So when I go to Congress, I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to shore up the ACA. We need to make sure that we close the loopholes so that we can negotiate prescription drugs. We need to lower the overall costs, but we also need to make sure that we protect the provisions within it, like keeping kids on the plan until they're 26, making sure that there's no lifetime caps, and ensuring that pre-existing conditions are covered. But at the same time, I want to introduce a public option so that anybody can buy into Medicare or Medicaid. As someone who has been a part of the ACA for the last 4 years, I have changed providers 3 out of those 4 years. I know how hard and difficult it is for families who don't have insurance through their corporations. And I intend to get out there and fix this because every single Iowan and every single American deserves affordable, effective health care. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we're going to second.
Funny story time?
That's after 6:30.
Yeah. I do realize though, ministers say the mind can absorb no more than the sea will endure. We said 7:30, so feel free if you get restless, walk around a bit, grab a cookie, get it.
Why don't we take a break?
This one starts with P, and it says $15 an hour sounds great. However, artificial intelligence in the workforce is quickly affecting everything from cashiers, burger flippers, to airline pilots and medical staff. It's been projected by some that as many as 100 million jobs could be lost by 2025. What kinds of policies or legislation would you work on to protect the dignity of American workers?
Well, it's, $50 an hour is a good place to start, and I'll get back to that. I can do it in 2 minutes. The first place to start is we have to go back to the days. It is so obvious when you see the line of when the income inequality crossed and went from one place to another, and it is directly tied to the union movement in this country, the labor movement in this country, not having the same power and the same amount of people in it that it had in the 1950s. And it's been a slow decline since. We need to to address the fact that we have made it too hard for people to join a labor union. We have made it too hard to organize. That is the main reason that we have the income inequality gap that we have. And it's one of the ways that we can solve the problem that you talked about, because if you have a labor union behind you, not only is your ability to get the right price for the toil that you do and the other benefits, but we know from history that when the American labor movement is strong, all of those other working people that aren't part of the American labor movement also gain the same things that the American labor movement gets from it. But let me tell you something about $15 an hour. There's not a state in this union in which you can rent a one-bedroom apartment, or two-bedroom apartment, I'm sorry, for if you're making less than $15 an hour. Well, who gets those type of apartments? Single parents trying to raise a kid, young people trying to maybe stay in the community that they grew up in, so that they can be part of that quality of life that they want. This is an economic issue, I get it, but $15 an hour is a social justice issue. It is again about allowing people to live in dignity. And so we can start with $15 an hour. That should be the federal minimum wage. But the bigger thing is, once we get $15 an hour, we have got to fight, and we have to make sure that the American labor movement is given the things that it needs to be as strong as it can be.
Amen.
So the person asking the question is exactly right. Artificial intelligence and automation and technology and globalization are going to greatly impact our country and this world here. And we need to seize upon that as an opportunity, though. 21st century jobs and a 21st century economy. We know that driverless cars are on the horizon. We know if you go to McDonald's on Fluor Drive that they need fewer people because I can order myself. We know if you go to Walmart they need fewer people because I can check myself out. We know if you go to the rent a car that I can do that by myself as well. So everywhere we're going, we're needing fewer and fewer people. I was just in Washington, D.C. yesterday and met with an old friend, a young man that I coached once upon a time. Says, Coach Eddie, I got to lay off 30 people here in 6 weeks. We don't need concierge services anymore at the Class A apartment complex that I'm in. So that is real, and that is in front of us. And we need to seize upon that. What do we do? First of all, my opinion, I think $36,000 to $40,000 is the minimum that somebody should make if they're working 40 hours a week. That could be a combination of wages and tax income credits. That should be our goal for any person that's out there. But more importantly, we need to be forward thinking about the policies and initiatives that are in front of us. We better be prepared because there could be a large group of people that are going to be in transition. And there could be some movement going on in our country that we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. And we need to be forward thinking about how we're going to have people move. We're going to be forward thinking about how we help people that have a job and move in 6 months to keep their health benefits. How we're going to have a person that moves another 6 months to keep their 401k benefits. We need to make sure that we have safety nets in place for people that are going to be moving, because this is going to be a moving economy. The time of our lives, and a lot of us in this room where we work 25, 30, 50 years in the same job are over for the most part. People will be moving a lot. We're going to have to be moving and be flexible because of the way this world is shifting. And we need to all be forward thinking on how we put together policies that keep people in a position to take care of themselves, take care of their families, and make them transition. Thank you. Make the stop sign bigger, I see. Make the stop sign bigger, I see.
I have two main goals when I get to Congress: rebuild the middle class and invest in our future. The first way we're going to do that is bring good paying jobs back here to Iowa, jobs that can support a family, and make sure that we've got the structures in place so that working women and families can be successful, like affordable child care, better paid family leave, and closing the pay gap. You know, right here in Iowa, if we close the pay gap, we put about $5 billion back into our economy and over $10,500 into the pockets of every single working woman. That's about 80% of our workers. Can you imagine how much that would help our economy? So we've got incredible opportunity there. We also need to address the Republican tax bill, which will increase the burden on our middle-class families and our children from years to come, while it gives opportunity and money back in the pockets of corporations, millionaires, and special interests. So one of the first things I'll be doing when I'm out in Congress is make sure that we reform that tax bill so that it works for middle-class families. Thirdly, I'm a small business owner. My husband and I know what it takes to run a small business, and I'm also a mom of 2 teenage boys who are eating me out of house and home. So I understand the struggles that our Iowa families are facing, and I want to make sure that we give our small businesses opportunity as well. Our small businesses are 92% of the businesses in this country, and they're the ones that are creating the jobs. Yet they don't have good tax incentives, and they have very limited opportunity for capital to expand their business. And those are the businesses that I want to help when I get out to Congress. Finally, I want to make sure that we invest in our future, that all of our kids have access to a good, solid public education system. I'm going to make sure that we shore up those resources, and I want every kid to have an opportunity for a post-secondary education, because we know when they do, they're going to have a better chance at life and be more successful. And finally, we need to lower the cost of healthcare and our higher education so that all families have opportunities to succeed. Thank you.
Here's what I know, and here's what I hear. Hardworking families, they want to make more money, period. Wages have not kept up with the high cost of anything, whether it's healthcare, housing, education, prescription drugs. They want leaders who want to focus on the needs of hardworking families and the issues they worry about at their kitchen tables, which is making ends meet. And we can do that. $15 an hour, you can't feed a family on that. And I tell you what, $7.25 is pathetic. It's embarrassing what Governor Reynolds and the Branstad team has done to not only to this state and that around the country. What I want to focus on in Washington, D.C. is living wages. How we help families gain the skills and the opportunities to earn a living wage, to feed their families, to start a small business, and to have their American dream. And a lot of that starts with unions. It's the reason, one of the big key reasons I'm in this race. I would not be here without hard-earned union benefits. Because when my husband died and I became a single mom of 2 kids, union benefits allowed me to go back to college, and a few years later, I got my very first job. Now, it was $8 an hour, but I knew, because I was a scrappy farm kid, that that job would lead to the next job, which would lead to the next job, which would lead to the next job. And here I am today, the president of a small real estate company in Des Moines. Look, Iowans, Americans, they're hardworking, they want to provide for their families, and they need leaders who are going to make that the focus of their work in Washington, D.C. I'm that leader.
Okay. What policies would you support to mitigate climate change?
I don't know.
I'm sure you've done it.
No, I never really answered that last question. I can remember what it said. You started.
Yeah, I started.
Okay. Mine, so it's back to me. That's it, I'm sorry. Read that one.
Okay, sure. What policies would you support to mitigate climate change?
So, if you go to our website at eddiemarlow.com, you'll see that we have a white paper on climate and the environment. It's a very bold one. We talk an awful lot about greenhouse gases and emissions. Talking about renewable fuels and renewable fuel standards. We're talking about an initiative where we can get to policy where we have no more fossil fuels in our country as soon as possible. Now, we're talking about a lot of issues tonight. We talked about guns, the economy, jobs, healthcare. We haven't talked about education yet. That's an important one. But the most important issue out in front of us today is the climate. We just don't know it, right? It's a beautiful day today, and we're oblivious to that. But if you go over to Africa, where I do go often, and you talk to people over there, they're deadly worried about what's going on with the climate, because it's created a mass migration within their continent. And it's causing a huge refugee crisis in our world. Again, we're just not touched by it on a daily basis. And that's why doesn't get as much attention. Plus money, which we've all talked about, is keeping it from coming forefront in front of us. So the policies have to be, how do we help encourage our communities to make sure that we're using less fossil fuels? How do we use wind energy, solar energy, hydro energy, and any other kind of energy that is not fossil related? How do we make sure that we provide tax credits for our farmers that are doing things that put carbon back into our soil? Those are the types of initiatives that we need to make. And this is something we need to be more forward thinking about as well. Because if we don't do so, this is going to be one that's going to climb upon us and we're not gonna be able to react fast. So keep this one in mind. I know there's things that bother us more. Our son that has an addiction issue, our daughters dealing with mental health, other healthcare issues, losing our job. But this is one that we wanna make sure we keep our eyes on, and we make sure we put a person in Congress that's gonna have this on their radar. Thank you very much.
Well, this is a topic that's near and dear to me. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to direct the governor's agenda for clean energy and the environment and help bring the wind industry here to Iowa, moving us towards energy independence, making us number 2 in wind energy production in the country, and also putting thousands of people to work in the process. So I know we've got incredible opportunity here in Iowa. Iowa's always been a leader when it comes to renewable energy, and I think it's time we double down on that. It's not just good for our future, it's great for our economy, and it's good for our farmers. So I want to make sure that we continue to invest and grow in wind. I want to also double down on solar. We're ranked around 16th in the country as far as solar capability, so we've got so much opportunity there to help our economy here in Iowa, move us towards energy independence, and address climate change at the same time. At the same time, I want to bring in the support mechanisms to help us get that energy out to other parts of this country, like smart grid technology and battery storage. I also am looking at ways we can improve our agriculture practices to help us prevent climate change. One of the things that we should be doing is looking at tilling practices. Here in Iowa, we've got the opportunity to do low-till or no-till. We've got farmers who are already doing that. That's really taking a look at the seeds that you have and the soil that you have and tilling down to the lowest level possible. Because when we till, we release carbon into the atmosphere. So I'm looking at opportunities where we can create technology that captures that carbon as we're tilling and then sinks it back down into the ground so that it doesn't get released again. In the meantime, as we bring these good paying jobs here and we protect ourselves against climate change, I want to make sure that we reduce our fossil fuel usage in this country through fuel efficient cars, fuel efficient appliances, and making sure that we have efficient manufacturing plants as well. This isn't just talk for me. I've done this not just in my work life, but in my personal life. I've stopped development through Walnut Woods Park for an unnecessary new road. Our environment is one of the biggest things that we need to address, because if we don't address climate change, we're not going to have the world that we see it as it is today. Thank you.
Well, climate change is a reality for us, and we see it with extreme weather all around the world, whether it's hurricanes in Florida or wildfires on the West Coast, rising seas, rising temperatures, glaciers that are melting away, tundra that's thawing out. We have to come together and talk about how we reduce our carbon footprint, which is at the root cause of all of this. Some of that is how we live our lives and the choices we make, but it's also the policies we make locally, at the state, and certainly federally. It doesn't help that our current leadership walked away from the Paris Climate Accord, an opportunity to work with all of our partners around the world to take better care of our world. But we don't have to wait for this president, who's the poor decision maker, doesn't care about our environment. We can continue to move forward, and we've done a great job of that here in Iowa, and I want to support policies that will continue to grow our wind energy, our biofuels, and also some research to expand markets for some of our corn and soybean products, continue to provide markets globally for those products. I think our wind energy and renewable fuels economy here in Iowa has grown about 30,000 well-paying jobs. And that's a direction we need to continue to go while we wait for new leadership in the White House and in Congress to enact policies that will reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Something that he said is exactly right. The climate crisis is actually a national security issue.
I hope so too.
There's less resources. Less resources are pushing people into situations where they're refugees, and then they're pushed into refugee situations in which they are desperate. The world becomes a much more dangerous place. And as we know, when the world's a much more dangerous place, oftentimes that falls on us to take care of that situation, or we try to take care of that situation. So this is a national security issue. The question, though, was what policy? I can think of one that I'm going to tie right back into it. 98% of the scientists say that this is real, that it's man-made, and if it's man-made, that means man can solve it. Yet, we still don't have a serious discussion in the United States Congress about fracking. We don't have a serious discussion in the United States Congress why we're still transferring so much of this energy through pipelines. We don't have a serious discussion, and in fact, we have to protest just to get some of these issues out there about it. We don't have a serious discussion about exactly what these other people, other candidates have talked about in terms of how do we get off of a carbon-based society. And the reason we don't have it is we need fundamental campaign finance reform. So the policy that I would work on first is to make our campaigns to the point where those folks who need to keep these things going for their profits can own enough congressmen to keep it going that way, even though 90% of scientists, 98% of scientists, and the American people want to do it a different way. We need campaign finance reform. We get that done, we'll be able to start addressing these problems.
Okay. We just passed a budget, $1 trillion deficit, and I guess what we'd like to know here is, what do you think of the budget that was passed, and what would your priorities be? And I think we start with
Well, I appreciate that question. I have to spend a little bit more time digging into the omnibus bill. It's a big one. But certainly, I know that the budgets reflect the values that the leaders have. And quite honestly, President Trump's budget definitely supports corporations, millionaires, and special interests again. And I know government can do better in the way that it budgets. I had the opportunity when I served at the Department of Management to find $200 million in savings, and we did that without laying people off and without cutting services. We were able to deliver good services to the people that live here in Iowa across the board, whether it was from an environmental perspective, human services, or public health. So I know government can run well and run efficiently. One of the things that I can't wait to dig into when I get out to Washington is making sure that we're running government effectively and efficiently. There are certainly ways that we need to be looking at how we're delivering services. We need to be looking at how we're budgeting and ensuring that we're making sure that the values that we have as Democrats, that we're putting the money behind that. So I'm going to dig into that bill, make sure that it shows opportunity for people to move ahead, that it supports issues and services that help raise up the lives of the people that live here, that it addresses our health care, that it addresses our environmental issues, certainly helps to create jobs. So I want to make sure that the entire bill reflects the values that we believe in as Democrats and doesn't reflect the values that support corporations, millionaires, and special interests.
Well, Cindy and I absolutely agree that a budget reflects the values of your leaders. And certainly President Trump's budget has been something that's been shocking. Cutting $10 billion from education. Huge cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those are things that I will stand up for and fight for in Washington, D.C. I'm all for looking at fraud and waste and efficiencies, and we can do that, and that can help with our budget. But looking to cut the core services that provide for progressive leadership, progressive policies, is not something I'll stand for. I'll tell you, I'm a product of those kind of progressive leaders. When I was a young person, our leadership, both in the state and nationally, invested in college education, for example. So it was subsidized about 80% and 20% students paid. Today, that's reversed. Our students, and what we've done, this leadership has done, is we've created a generation of young students who will be strapped with college debt, unable to start new businesses, unable to buy homes, and delaying family formation. And that's just one policy decision, underfunding education and its effects that it's had on our communities and our future generations. So, what will I do? Well, absolutely, I'm going to promote and support a budget that takes care of people, because that's what we do as Democrats, but also is fiscally wise, focuses on how we balance our checkbook, eliminate waste, eliminate fraud, and work towards a balanced budget. Matter of fact, I think the last time we had a balanced budget was a Democratic president.
Last 3 times, I think, actually. This budget, think about this. This budget has in it 3 weapon systems that the Defense Department said they didn't want. And they still gave it, they put it in even though the Defense Department said they didn't want it. It has $19 billion in ACA subsidies that are going to the privatization of it, that Trump cut the reason for the subsidies out of the budget. But they still got their $19 billion, which we all know is going to go to bonuses and things like that for them. The agriculture, the way that we do the agriculture budget is actually upside down. The top 8% of companies in this country that do agriculture that get 90% of the subsidies that go to it. The bottom 60% of farmers in terms of earning don't get a single subsidy. So we have to reshape the argument is what we have to do. Everyone always talks about the deficit, that's fine. You know, the deficit is because we do spend things. So how about if we start asking this question? Well, maybe we should bring more money in. You care about the deficit? Let's bring more money in. How are we going to do that? You know what? We're going to start taxing the people at the upper 1% where they should be taxed. We're going to close the offshore loopholes that they have where they can make money on Americans, but they can put it in an offshore bank account and they don't have to pay any taxes on it. We should say there's more of us than you. We're not going to have this debate anymore about what we should be cutting for the American people. We're gonna make you pay for what this country has done for you, and you're gonna pay more in taxes, and that's how we're gonna make up the extra revenue.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I have not read the 1,300-page budget.
Everything you said it right.
That's what I was going to say, because nobody else does either, right? And we need to change the way we do politics, though, Carl, because this thing was done in the back room. It's done because of money and special interests, and we continue to lose out. So it's a recurring theme we're having here today. It's campaign finance reform. There's people standing up and speaking out that special interests and big money is driving this thing. And I gotta be honest, I think Democrats capitulated on some of this budget as well and gave in because they got some things. So everybody's up there patting themselves on the back on a good budget deal. And there were a few decent things in there that the Democrats can be proud of, but lots of bad things in there. We pointed them out here. He pointed out very eloquently what's in there, especially for our defense budget, which doesn't need the money there. I'm very worried about where we're heading with our defense budget and our military and where we might be if we allow this president to go unchecked. And that's why another very important reason why we win this seat. We need to talk about this economy overall, and it's not just the economic piece, it's also the tax piece, it's what we're doing with our education system. We need to make sure that all those things are tied together so we're providing really meaningful jobs in this 21st century. We need to make sure that our budget is going to look at infrastructure plans, which we still can't seem to get done. That should have been the very first thing that Donald Trump could have done. He had a golden opportunity to be a change maker for this country, and he's flopped on it. And now they still can't even get back to that because they can't figure out how they're going to do that right. There are so many things that we could be doing in this country that are forward-thinking, that put people in a good position, whether it's with our climate and handling our environment, those great green energy jobs there, whether it's with our healthcare, what we're doing there, with what we're doing with our education system and our economy and our infrastructure. They can make this country, with our education system and our economy and our infrastructure, they can make this country the greatest country that it should be in this world. And we need to go fight for that. So this seat, and somebody's right, 50 years, this could be a generational difference. Not only here at this congressional seat, but also in our gubernatorial seat. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have what is probably a very good final question. But I'd like, with the indulgence, can we do 3 minutes? Remember we mentioned that we wanted you to tell us a fun thing about you that most people don't know. But the question I have here is, why are you the best candidate to beat David Young? So what I'd like to do is first minute, give us your fun fact, and then tell us why you're the best person to beat David Young. And we start with Teresa.
Fun fact first?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, and some of you know this and some of you don't, but some of you have been shocked by it. I have an identical twin sister. Yep. Pete here knows that she sounds just like me. She looks just like me. Maybe it's me. No. And I'll say every time she comes to visit, she lives up in Wisconsin, she'll run to get groceries or drop off banana bread, and people walk over to her and introduce themselves. They're like, "Hi, Teresa," and she just is like, "Whoa." And we tell the most delightful stories about being twins, because it also happens when I go to visit her. I'll be in the grocery store, and folks like you who know my twin sister, who volunteers at the library, is on her town council, and engaged in her community, will stare at me. Right? And it takes a little while to catch on to that, oh, they think I'm Maria. So that is my fun fact. I promise you I won't ever have her sit up here and do this, because I don't think she would want to. But don't be surprised if you're at an event and that somebody that looks like me doesn't respond to your smile. Not that she doesn't smile, but doesn't know who you are. So introduce yourself, tell her how you know me, and she'll tell you who she is too. How and why am I the best candidate to beat David Young? Well, as we've seen all over this country, whether it's Virginia, Alabama, Texas, Pennsylvania, Illinois, the way to take back 24 seats in the House of Representatives is to elect candidates that match our districts. And if we don't, we are going to become the Democratic Party of the East and the West Coast, and I'm just not going to let that happen. Now, we have to win back some heartland seats, these rural seats, to make that happen. And to make that happen, we've got to have candidates that have deep rural roots, who also understand urban living. Candidates that want to focus on the issues hardworking families want to focus on every single day. So for me, to win this seat, we keep it basic, we get out to the rural areas, we focus on economic security, healthcare, and education. And I'm going to continue to do that throughout this campaign, and I'm confident we will beat David Young.
In 1999, well, let me start with the 30,000 foot. The thing that actually a lot of people know about me is I'm kind of a dork when it comes to sports. And I'm in a lot of fantasy leagues. And in 1999, my boss actually got a promotion and gave me his rotisserie All-Iowa Baseball League team. And I have now been in that league for, well, it was 1999, so I've been in that league for almost 20 years now, right, 19 years. And a lot of the same people were in it when I got to it, and I haven't done very well in it, but that's another issue. And what the point of this is, that I think is kind of interesting, is if I'm honored enough to be your nominee, and if I'm honored enough to win this seat for the United States Congress, I figure I'm going to be a little too busy to run that baseball team. So I'm going to give it back to my old boss, Tom Vilsack, when he, I think he might have a little more time than he had at that time, when he gave me that fantasy baseball team back then. So I think I'm in a unique position because of my history, because of the 20 years of working on campaigns, working on some campaigns again that we talked about earlier that are they told us we didn't have a chance to win. I know how to win. In 1996, when I worked for Leonard Boswell, we hadn't elected a freshman in 10 years to the United States Congress. 1998, we hadn't elected a governor in a generation. When I worked for Chet Colbert, there hadn't been a Democrat that followed a Democrat through election in 70 years. I picked up a few things in those campaigns. I know how to win. When I worked for Bernie Sanders, we were winning in places that the pundits said we weren't even going to compete in. I know how to win. But I want to be clear about something. It's not just about winning. We can try for a blue wave. I get that. But we have to stand for things. We have to stand for a bold agenda, because we can't just expect to win an election. We have to try to win the future, and I believe we can do that. I believe we can do that by standing for issues and not nuancing them, because that's what I'll also do when I'm out there. So, I'll tell you, I'll say it again, I've won before and know how to win these tough elections. I've won a lot of tough ones, I've been part of teams that have won them. But we have to stand for things, and I'm willing to do that. I will do that, and I ask for your support, and I'd be honored to have it. Thank you.
Interesting. Wow. I think people that get to know me best will learn that I am a crazy, determined person. Got a chance to play basketball one day with Barack Obama, and he didn't pick me to be on his team. And I was determined that he would not score on me. And I learned very quickly that he could not go to his right. He's left-handed. And I goaded him for an hour and 15 minutes about how he could not go to his left. We had a great time. And I bring that up because determination is what we need. And I'm determined to beat David Young. And how do we do that? By first of all, defining who he is. I hope whoever's recording this takes us back to him. Because he's turned his back on our kids, our teachers, and our schools. He's attempted to deny access to health care to hardworking Iowans, women the right to control their own destiny. He's crazy silent on everything that Donald Trump has to say or do. And he has no answers for our economy, our climate challenges in front of us, or anything else that brings us forward in this country into the 21st century. It has to be more than that. We need to make sure we're telling people where we stand, and we need to stand firm. And we talk about all those issues tonight. We stand for health care for all Americans. We stand to make sure that the promises we made to our seniors when it comes to Social Security and Medicare are met. We stand for our kids, gun safety. We stand for a comprehensive public education strategy to make sure we position our folks for the future. We're going to stand for a global economic initiative that takes care of our labor and our consumers and our average hardworking Americans first, and corporations and banks second. We make sure we stand for that progressive, inclusive populism I talked about in my opening today, where we make sure that we meet the needs and the promise of every single American in this country. Whether they're black or white, whether they're gay or straight, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're labor or employer, no matter what their condition is. And if we do that, as I mentioned earlier today, then we get this country back on track. Because it's off the rails right now. And we need to go make sure we fight hard to do that and get our country back to where it needs to be. We're talking about hope and not fear. We're talking about love and not hate. We're talking about truth and not deception, and peace and not war. And if we do those things, and this is a generation that takes us back to a place that Robert Kennedy searched for once upon a time before his life was cut too short. EddieMorrow.com, go check us out. Go like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. I'd love to have your support. Thank you. God bless you.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about me is I'm a bit of an adventurer. My husband and I decided on our first anniversary to go skydiving, because that's what you do to celebrate your first year. And I learned very quickly, don't drink champagne the night before. But since then, I've zip-lined in many different parts of this country. We are whitewater kayakers, and we even have a zip line in our own backyard. So any day where I'm feeling like I need to have a pickup, I just go out and climb up the tree and hit the zip line. I think being outside and doing adventure sports is probably one of the most fun and best things that you can do as a person. So it's something that keeps me energized and excited. How am I going to beat David Young? Well, I'm going to take that energy and just kick his butt out on the trail. David Young is not working for Iowans. As a matter of fact, he's working against us. This guy's a career politician, and we need to make sure that every single person knows that. He has spent his life in Washington serving under Senator Grassley, and then as our congressperson, not working for the people that live here, telling us that he'll vote against the health care bill, and then in the middle of the night turning around and voting for it. We need to make sure that every single person knows that David Young isn't working for us here in Iowa, and he doesn't understand what we need. Secondly, it's about being present. Since the beginning of this campaign, it's been about Iowans. It's why we spent the last 10 months visiting every single county. We've held 80 meet and greets in 13 of the 16 counties, and by the end of this primary, we'll have held 100 of those to make sure that we get out into every single community and listen to the concerns that every single person in this district is facing. Third of all, it's experience. I'm the only candidate in this race that actually has experience in solving and fixing complex government problems. We have so many issues that we need to address out in Washington, and every day they're piling up. This is a 2-year job, and we need somebody who can hit the ground running. And I've got the leadership and the experience and the tenacity to make sure that we move forward with everything that the people here in Iowa need. So I hope to get your vote so that we can bring hope and opportunity to every single person in this district again. Thank you.
Okay.